So, hello, Abdel. First of
Hello.
all, thank you so much for finding time to sit down with me and talk to me because I know you're insanely busy and it's really hard to have a bit of time off. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. So maybe you can like introduce yourself. I think I could introduce you, but I think you'll do a better job at introducing yourself.
Sure. My name is Abdel is my actually nickname. I think I have a very long name because I am from Morocco, so I have an Arab name, and it's kind of complicated for a lot of people to pronounce. So I go by my nickname Abdel. I'm a developer advocate at Google. That's what I do. I work mostly on stuff around containers and Kubernetes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been at Google for almost 11 years, and before that, I've done quite a lot of other stuff in other companies. And even inside Google, I've done a lot of roles. Started pretty much low level at the hardware. Now I work on cloud. So that's kind of briefly who I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'll dive straight into questions because I have a lot of questions to ask you.
Go for
And
it.
yeah, so my first question is reflecting on your journey, how has your background and upbringing influenced your approach to technology and problem solving in your career? And you have a really interesting background too.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So I grew up. Well, it's just a little bit background. I mean, I grew up in a family that had nothing to do with tech. I think I'm the first one in my entire. Not when I say family, I don't mean my parents and brother. I mean my entire family, like the big family. I was one of the first people to actually go to tech.
Mm-hmm.
So have like a formal education, get a master's degree in software engineering, and go to tech. I got my first computer at 14. I
Mm-hmm.
started writing C++ code at 15.
Mm-hmm.
I stole internet from my neighbor for 2 years, so I didn't really pay for internet for like 2 years. Um, so I think that I grew up in a medium income family, so not too poor, not too rich.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandfather is a construction worker, used to be. My father is a taxi driver, half parts mechanic, half parts other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I grow up with this culture of like DIY, like do your own thing, fix your own stuff. I don't think we have ever called anybody to fix anything at home. We mostly figure things out by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think tech to a large extent, and that's actually one of the reasons why I love hardware, is
Mm-hmm.
because I love tinkering with actual hardware. So for me, tech is not just software; it just goes beyond, just programming. It's like all the way down to the hardware level. And so that curiosity out of just learning how to fix cars with my father and learning how to build stuff with my grandfather um, made me curious about how stuff works in general. I remember I was 15. I dismantled my family TV, like the only 14-inch, those like old school TV with like a belly that we used like a CRT TV. I dismantled one just because I wanted to know how it works. And
Were your parents angry?
uh, oh yes,
Ah,
yes. But well, I mean, you remember those TVs were super expensive at the time, right? So and it was a color TV, not black and white, so that was pretty expensive. And so yeah, I think it sparked curiosity in the sense that like I don't get too much attracted to like hype stuff, generally speaking. And I
mm-hmm.
also, when I get interested in something, I really want to know how it works, right? I want to go beyond the quick start guide or the hello world example. I want to actually know how things work under the hood. Um, so that's kind of like the background. And that's essentially why my first job out of university was in an actual data center, which is kind of weird for somebody who studied computer science or studied programming technically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I went straight to a company that had data center and worked there for 3 years before joining Google. And that was also because I always wanted to be slightly closer to the hardware. This is back in the time. Now I work on cloud, and I think it's much cooler than what we used to do. But I still have my own little data center at home. I have like a bunch of Intel Nukes, those like mini ATX computers that I like to tinker with, and Raspberry Pis and stuff like that. So
I'm
I think yeah,
also I'm
that's
also
uh,
looking at your background right now, and you have
mhm.
interesting pictures and also a truck on one of your shelves. So
Yes. That's also because I love Lego. So that's a Lego kit,
Mm-hmm.
and those are just a bunch of crap that I collected over the years. um, I should probably. I just realized that actually that Google thing is looking mirrored on the camera, so I should probably mirror the camera next time. But yeah, it's actually even in Google. In when I worked in Google data center, my first job at Google was in an actual data center, and even there, I mean, you're working in data center, so you're interacting with hardware and servers and switches and routers and stuff like that. But I was still like super curious because Google make their own hardware, so I
Mm-hmm.
was able to like actually get more hands on and get like more access to electronic schematics and can understand how certain things work. And I'm probably one of the few software engineers that really know how a computer work under the hood. I am not saying that most of them doesn't, but I just like because I had to assemble my own hardware before,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so that's kind of like the background.
And I also wanted to ask you, so obviously you moved out of Morocco. It's so you're originally from Morocco, and you I don't know
Yes.
at what age you moved out, but how was the situation before in Morocco in terms of like tech? Because I live in Georgia, and if I compare like the capital city Tbilisi with, let's say, Berlin or Paris, the tech communities are really small here, you know, and it's really difficult to let's say develop like a network of people or friends that are like similar minded and they also do tech. Is the situation similar in Morocco right now, or even back then, or it was much more progressive? What do you think?
I think I grew up there during the peak of the not I wouldn't call it a revolution, but I would call it like there was like so a little bit of background. For those who doesn't know, Morocco we speak French, and that's
Mm-hmm.
because Morocco used to be a French colony, right?
Mm-hmm.
So French is almost a second language for pretty much everybody of my age or my generation. I'm 40 right now, so people who are
Mm-hmm.
my age or younger, they speak French. And of course English because we are pretty tuned to the American culture, so movies and series and stuff like that. Um, so a long time ago, the government had this strategy about trying to attract tech companies into Morocco, and that worked for a while, and it's still a big part of the market. But a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these companies are actually consulting companies. So your typical big consulting house, I'm not going to mention any names, but whatever consulting company you can think about, we
Mm-hmm.
have we either have right now or had one of their offices at some point in my country. And that was basically a government strategy where they designed those. They call them free zones or nearshore zones or whatever you want to call them,
Mm-hmm.
but they are essentially areas where companies can establish themselves. They have offices, they can hire people, and they have very lucrative deals. They have very good like tax deals. The government help them kind of start the business and stuff like that. And because those companies, because we are also super close to France, both culturally and also in terms of time zone, at any moment of time, there is only 1 hour difference between Morocco and France. What ended up happening is a lot of companies that are in France started outsourcing work to Morocco
Mm-hmm.
because you could hire in Morocco engineers for cheaper than you would hire them in France. So they started just like outsourcing IT jobs to Morocco. So way before this whole offshore thing started, it started with call centers initially. So during my university time, I had a lot of friends who were working in call centers. I
Mm-hmm.
was lucky enough to never have to do that
Mm-hmm.
because I cannot imagine myself doing tech support for 8 hours a day. And if somebody did, kudos to you, like power to you. Uh, but then when I graduated out of university, yeah, there was quite a lot of companies, so I could basically get any job as a developer in any of these companies that I really wanted to. But somehow I was never attracted to that, just because I had friends working in these companies, and they were always telling me stories that I kind of like scared me, and the reason is simply um, because those engineers are located in Morocco, or at the time, because those engineers are in Morocco, they were considered kind of like second class citizen. So they will always get
Really?
the tasks. Yeah, they will always get the task of actually executing. They would never be in the decision path. So somebody in France will decide how things need to be designed, and they will send it to somebody in Morocco to write the code for it, right? And so that was never attractive to me. And so I ended up working in an actual startup. So the company where I worked was a company that just started a data center business because there was none before us. And this like businessman person that spent quite a lot of time in the US, Moroccan, that spent quite a lot of time in the US, came back and said, okay, let's open a data center. And the thing with IT is it doesn't matter what kind of IT do, you need a data center because you need to host stuff somewhere, right? And so that business took off. So I was lucky because I was in the beginning of that business or that kind of sector. There was no one before us, and now there are like tons of companies doing the same thing as my previous employer was doing. Um, so I was lucky that I came at the beginning of that like rush, if you want. So the way I really like to describe Morocco when it comes into the tech sector is that we are Europe about 10 years later.
Yeah, like
whatever
Georgia.
happens in Europe, it takes a little bit of time for Morocco to catch up. So in terms of like finding people, it wasn't really a big problem because I studied computer science in university. So it was relatively easy. The other thing that
back then, sorry,
yeah,
I'm interrupting you. Back
yeah.
then, was computer science already super popular?
When I was in university, no. When I quit university, it became super popular, yes.
Really? Oh my god.
Actually,
Wow.
there is one thing interesting about Morocco that a lot of people don't know. We have about equal number of male to female students in computer science universities in Morocco.
Really?
Yeah, it's very diverse actually.
Wow.
And the reason why that's the case, it's because computer science. So you have to keep in mind that Morocco is a very conservative society. And computer science for women is considered a safe job because you don't have to do shifts, you don't have to work late, you don't have to like work weekends. So it's like a 9 to 5 job. So a lot of people go to it just because it is a 9 to 5 job, not because out of passion. I was passionate, but a lot of people in my university were not. They were just there just because it was, okay, well, this is a good job, a good field. It gives you good jobs, pays good salary. The hours are reasonable. So why not, right? And of course, because there was demand and there is still demand. Right now, I don't know what's the case. Right now, I know that there are startups and there are like companies that are kind of local doing like stuff for the local markets. Because the country is catching up and, internet is huge. Like I think internet penetration in Morocco is ridiculous, something like 95% or something. So 95% of the population have internet. It's wild.
Yeah,
So
that's a really high number. Wow.
it is. Yeah. And so so I think when I was there, it was at the beginning of this like rush or catch up, if you want. I don't call it a rush, I call it catch up because Morocco is always playing catch up. Right now, it's when I go, because there is a conference that I go to every year, DevOps Morocco, in October. If you stay in that small bubble of the conference, you feel like Morocco is pretty much up to standards with the rest of the world. But I know that it's still kind of lacking in terms of, or lagging behind in terms of like technology and adoption. So for probably the audience who are gonna listen to this, actually one of the most popular frameworks in Morocco is React. React and React. Yes. There's quite a lot of front end stuff done in Morocco for some reason.
Yeah, I think also in Georgia, to be honest. It's also super
Yeah.
popular here.
I have no idea why. So it's Java, .NET, and React are like the main three technologies that are kind of popular in the country. I mean, Java and .NET, that's understandable because that's kind of the enterprise programming language, right? Java and .NET. But somehow React is quite big. And now all these new young JavaScript frameworks like Next.js and, all this Angular, of course, have been around for a while. So there is actually, I have friends who run a tech community in Morocco, online one, and they do a sort of like a Stack Overflow survey. They call it State of Dev. And the numbers are public. They have been running it for 3 years. And you can actually go there and see like, okay, like out of the people who reply to the survey, which technologies are the most popular. And you see React is kind of very, very high up.
Wow, that's so bizarre. My God. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we have similar situation in Georgia. You're correct. We're also 10 years behind,
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of like the situation. I think it's changing quite fast. Each time I go back home now, there is like a new app to do stuff online, and people are opening up more to like buy-in online and e-commerce and online banking, and it's this stuff require mentality change. People have to like adopt stuff, right?
Yeah, of course.
So yeah.
But I think those, even in Europe, are a little bit difficult to adopt due to bureaucracy in certain countries, you know? In Georgia, like the online banking is so good. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I can pay for everything just from literally using like my phone. Like I can pay for my university and things like that.
It's
So
the same in Sweden, but yeah, I think that other countries are still behind, like France, Germany, for
yeah,
example.
Germany for sure. Germany for
Oh my
sure.
God. I mean, Germany barely have internet. Like when I go to Germany, I never have. Like a lot of like it's wild. I go to Germany, go to Berlin, and go to Alexanderplatz, the
Mm-hmm.
city center of Berlin, and you will not have 4G. I dare you to have 4G anywhere in city center of Berlin.
Oh
It's
my god.
crazy.
Oh my god. I'll have to test that the next time I'm there.
It's wild.
So my next question is, and you just mentioned that you worked in a data center. You also worked in a startup, also in Google. So you have worn a lot of different hats. How
Yes.
have your roles evolved over time, and how has each transition shaped your perspective on the tech industry?
It's a very good question. I I don't like one of the things I tell people all the time is I don't necessarily have kind of like a plan for my career, but I do have things that I know I don't want to do. And one of the things I don't want to do is I don't want to go to management. Like I don't want to be a
Yeah, I
manager, right?
actually, even when we met in real life, you told me about it, and you also told me don't go into management myself.
Yeah, because it's not for me, right? It's just that there are people who are more built for that kind of roles, not for me. So I think that if you don't want to go the management path, staying as an individual contributor is a very valid option and very good option. So in terms of progression, I think I progressed just in terms of like junior, senior, kind of like the typical how do you progress as an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there are a few things that I have learned through this progression, this career progression. One of them is the fact that the more senior you are, the less important is in the less it becomes important how much do you know technology yourself, right? Like whether you know technology or not is not very important when you are in a senior position. It's more like how can you drive the conversation inside the team, how can you get your team to adopt things and learn, how do you teach other people, how do you
Mm-hmm.
mentor other people. This becomes more important. This is one thing. The other thing also is that it's also about your experience in knowing when things work and when it doesn't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So knowing how to write a function is not important, but looking at a function and realizing this is not going to scale or this is a problem is your value as a senior engineer, generally speaking. And here I am using function in the programming context, but it can be anything. If you're a network engineer, it's basically you look at the design and you go like, okay, this is a bottleneck or this is not going to work, right? So so I think that as I am progressing in my career, like it's mostly about being aware of the things you should focus on less and the things you need to focus on more. And
Mm-hmm.
it's more about what value do you bring to a team, considering your experience, right? This is on one hand. On the second hand, how does that shape my views of technology? Like the answer to that is very simple for me. It's a very cyclical field. We live in a field where things on average repeat themselves every 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So every 10 years on average, we go back to the same problems that we've been trying to solve 10 years ago, but we just solve them differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can give you a very concrete example. 10, 11, 12 years ago, I was working on OpenStack doing virtual machine orchestration.
Mm-hmm.
Now I work on Kubernetes doing container orchestration.
Mm-hmm.
Orchestration problems are the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're just doing this at a different level, but it's the same set of problems. It's the same basic concepts. It's the same. Like in the 15 years I've been in computer science, service discovery haven't changed. It's still DNS based. Like
Mm-hmm.
we haven't invented a way to do a new way to do service discovery. So um like 15 years later, pretty much everything we do relies on compute, memory, network, and storage. So I feel like one thing that I have remained on, like what that remained kind of valid for me is since I have very, very strong understanding of very, very basic concepts, it allows me to basically pretty much pick up anything along the way that I need to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also being able to read code helps quite a lot. So I'm not really striving to become expert in something I'm not. I am more thinking mostly how can I use my existing experience to these new things that are happening around us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, I was just having a conversation a couple of days ago with a colleague of mine, and we were talking about machine learning because
Mm-hmm.
that's the new
New
that's the new
trend.
hype, right? Exactly. And so one of the I think one of the most common tools that people are using these days, which is to run like machine learning models locally, especially for development, is this thing called Olama. It's just like a command line tool. You can download it, install it, and then you do Olama pull whatever model you want, like Llama 3 or Gemma from Google or Mistral, whatever. And then you can run it locally, and it runs locally, and then it has an API, and you can talk to it. And and we were talking about it, and I was like, well, it's kind of like it works like containers, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
like you have a container runtime, use the container runtime to pull an actual container, you execute the container, and then you have a ports that the container is listening on. So like fundamentally speaking, it's just a process and an artifact. The process is the container runtime, the artifact is the model. So it's not really that much difference in terms of how most applications work, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so yeah, so fundamentally these things doesn't really change that much. We just kind of invent or create new ways around how people use technology. But if you really dig under the hood onto how these things are built, they're all based on the same primitives, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned that like the same problems that we have 10 years ago, we still have the same problems today, right? What do you think is the issue? Do you think the issue is that we don't solve the problem, rather try to treat the symptom, and then we go on like a next abstraction 10 years later and the problem comes back? Or do you think that the problem is that we are just technol tech te- oh my god, technically
So
not
yeah,
developing as we're supposed to?
I don't think I don't think it's like a short-sighted problem, or it's not really a problem per se. It's just like I think it's just a side effect of how fast things are moving,
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
that we need to come up with a solution relatively quickly, and no one has time to sit down and think about how this stuff are going to change in the next 10 years, right?
Yeah.
um, and I think that there is probably space for people to do that kind of like long-term reflection. That's more what people in the research field are doing, so that's what academia is
Mm-hmm.
doing essentially. And I think we are in a situation where, in my opinion, we have a right balance between academia people working on long-term solutions, and I'm talking here like an example that I can think about is post-quantum encryption, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we all know that like one of the side effects potentially of quantum computing would be that it might break all encryption as we know it today.
Mm-hmm.
um, and there are people actually thinking hard about how can we make a quantum safe encryption, right? um, and that's kind of like in the research space. But in the technology space, and especially in the technology that is day to day used by people, I mean, your average developer is not going to spend more than 1 or 2 days thinking about a short term solution to a problem that they have at hand so they can move to the next thing. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason I think, or one of the reasons behind it, is because basically most developers care about shipping stuff. They just want to like ship things and just move on, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, I think
no
so too.
one, yeah, no one even thinks about whether this thing is gonna work properly for 1 year from now. They just think like, is are all my tests passing? Yes, okay, good. Create
Mm-hmm.
the pull request, pick up the next one.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
it.
But I
Uh,
think it's not because developers are bad, but rather that the management and the company itself is the one that's making the developers work that way, you know? Maybe I'm wrong.
that's what we're, yeah, that's what we're requiring from people. And I don't think even it's like an implicit thing that people are thinking about. I think it's just like how stuff like we are moving in a very fast world. And basically today, if you're a company and you don't ship features, you are dead, essentially, right?
Yeah, there's
Whatever
always going to be
idea,
someone else better and faster than you.
exactly. Whatever idea you come up with, there is already somebody building it. So, so,
You better be
so yeah,
fast.
you better be fast. Exactly.
Okay, my next question. Maybe you already answered it a little bit, but can you share a pivotal moment or decision that significantly influenced your career path and how you view technology today?
Oh, yeah, so, sure. So I don't think that that's, I don't think that there wasn't really a pivotal moment. There was like kind of few interactions and moments that I have came across over the last couple of years. And I think that generally speaking, the observation I've been making is that we assume in our field, we assume that everybody is smart, and that's not the case,
Mm.
right? We assume that everybody is smart and that everybody is really good at what they're doing. And the reality is that we are surrounded by a lot of really bad people. And
Mm-hmm.
bad is not in the sense of like they are bad people, bad from a technical point of view. People
Mm-hmm.
who are just not good enough technically. And that happened to me because previous to the role I have right now, which is the developer relations role, I was in consulting for a while, for like 4 years. So I was working with Google, and I was working in a team inside of Google that does consulting for external companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because I've been in that Google bubble for a while, before this role, I was just working internally with Googlers. And most of the time inside of Google, almost everybody's kind of the same level because the hiring criteria are very strict. So everybody's is like good enough. That I didn't realize that outside of Google and generally speaking in the tech markets, there is
Mm-hmm.
quite a lot of people who are not good enough technically. And so that took me some time to come to that realization, to realize, there is this book called Surrounded by Idiots.
No, I've never heard about
Yeah,
it before.
there is actually a book called Surrounded by Idiots. I like it made me realize like, yeah, we're most of the time surrounded by idiots. And I'm not so using the term in a derogatory way. It's just because it's simply like we're surrounded by people who we're surrounded by people who lack fundamentals, and the lack of fundamentals make them not understand either how things work or even how to read question. And I can give you like a very concrete example. This is if somebody is listening to this and goes like, oh, this guy is too arrogant, I encourage you to go on Stack Overflow
Mm-hmm.
and just create an account, pick whatever topic you're familiar with, and look at the questions people are asking.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
take a random question, right? And you will realize that it's not even the case that people are asking dumb questions, is that people don't even know how to ask questions.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That's
a
that's a
lot of
big
times,
problem.
right? And a lot of times when you look at the question, you're like, but like, why are you even why are you even a developer? Like and it's so that kind of realization made me not. So there are two ways you can think about this, right? You can either take it with the context of like, oh, I am better than everybody else, so kind of become an arrogant person,
Mm-hmm.
or you can think about it from a perspective of having more empathy toward people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially how it helped me, because in my role as a developer advocate, my job is to actually teach people,
Mm-hmm.
and having empathy is a crucial aspect in how do you do the teaching. So it made me also aware of the fact that when I am putting together content and I'm going to present it, I have to make sure that I tune it to the right level of details that is needed for the audience I'm going to talk to, right? So that you don't lose people along the way.
Yeah, yeah. Of course.
I mean, you do speaking as a like part of your role, so you know that like the worst talks you can attend are talks where the speaker just feels superior to everybody else,
Yeah.
right? Or arrogant, or like presents the topic in the sense that I am better than you. And that's never gonna win you any friends. You need to be able to make the audience feel that you are at the same level as them, pretty much,
Yeah, yeah. Be
right?
more be more emphatic and try to resonate with the audience.
Exactly.
Especially when I'm doing speaking for students. I think for students it's like the most important part to do, you know. So
Exactly.
so now that we touched this topic, I also wanted to ask you, so one of the main key roles as a developer advocate, you have to bridge the gap between the technology and the community, right? So you're like the middleman. And except, let's say, empathy, how else do you balance the technical expertise with effective communication so that your message is delivered to the community and to the developers or whoever the audience is?
Yeah. It's actually a very, so you know what I was thinking today. I came across like an article written by somebody. I don't know if you saw it, but at the moment when we are recording this, there is quite a lot of ongoing conversation on LinkedIn about the fact that AWS just silently deprecated or discontinued some services,
Yeah, I was
and
just
there are,
reading about it. I was so shocked.
yeah, and there's quite a lot of people that are very angry about this, right? And I was reading somebody's article about this, and the article itself was interesting, but it's written by somebody who lives in the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the article, they were making references to American things that if you are not an American audience, you wouldn't understand,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they were making references to like football, which is not even American football, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the game you play by hand, not by foot,
Mm-hmm.
and baseball, and making references to like prominent sport personalities and stuff like that. And they were making references in the article to say, oh, these articles are considered by AWS to be of this LeBron level of kind of like sport people. LeBron is famous basketball player for those who doesn't know, and these other ones are considered this kind of other players that no one cares about. And it just made me think like, but the person who wrote this article, are they writing it for everyone or are they writing it for American audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like who is the audience? Who are you trying
To reach.
to talk to, right? Exactly. And again, if you are writing an article or you are writing articles and your analytics tells you that people are coming from the US, that's fine, right? If that's your audience, but it's the internet. The internet is a microcosm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so so I think that, and the reason I'm bringing this up is to get to the point of effective communication. I think effective communication is basically talking in a way that everybody can understand,
Mm-hmm.
and also talking the with the context that not everybody shares the same cultural backgrounds as you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I start talking either in a public forum, so talking to an audience, or a podcast, or a video, or in an article, because these are all just various forms of communication, and I make references to only people from my cultural background understand, um, I am not talking effectively because I will lose people, right? You will
Mm-hmm.
lose people who will not understand who you're talking about, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
what are you talking about? And so this is, and I mean, this is probably a self-centered American thing that I notice quite a lot, that Americans think that they are the only one that exists in the world, and then
Mm-hmm.
that everybody knows what's happening in that country. And that's part of, and one of the things that I actually like about living in Europe is, by living in Europe and traveling around, you understand that there are key cultural differences between even countries in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
if you go to these different countries, you have to be able to talk in a way that is approachable and that everybody can understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this is key number one. It's talking in a way that is approachable to most people, right? That's the number one thing. Um, so number two is advocacy is about teaching, in my opinion, and it's teaching that goes both ways. You are teaching external people how to use your technology. That's what you're advocating for. But you're also teaching your organization or your company what developers and people who are using your products are trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we are doing internally. We actually talk to the product teams quite a lot and we send them feedback. And that could be feedback coming from us trying the product, or could be feedback coming from external people.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes through, hanging out in Stack Overflow and seeing what kind of questions people ask, attending conferences and actually having a hallway track, talking to people on the side, and they tell you, I'm trying to do this and it's not working. or just generally speaking, social media or stuff like that, right? So, like I can give you a very simple example. This is something that just happened to me last week. Um, on I know that you are on your AWS hero, right?
No,
So
I'm not. I'm actually
you're not,
not.
but
No.
you hang out in the AWS space
Yeah,
quite a
yeah.
lot. Yes. So there is a feature that every single cloud provider have, which is vulnerability scanning, right?
Mm-hmm.
You upload a bunch of artifacts, and then you can turn on vulnerability scanning, and then
Mm-hmm.
the cloud provider will scan them and then tell you if there are vulnerabilities in your container images or packages or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody on Twitter wrote a tweet which is complaining about the pricing of vulnerability scanning on Google Cloud. So on Google Cloud, vulnerability scanning costs $0.26 per scan per artifact, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you would change your artifact, so if you would update the container image and the new digest is generated, that's a new scan, and then you pay for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I took that tweet and basically sent it internally to some product managers,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, yeah, we saw it. They actually saw it before me, and they wrote a response. They wrote a doc, and the doc that they wrote was mostly meant for internal people. It was mostly if a customer sees that tweet and comes to us and asks us about it, ask our sales team, we have a doc that explains the difference. And so I looked at the doc. I was like, we need to make this public, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent quite a lot of time going across AWS, Azure, and GCP and comparing the pricing. And basically, this is part of what a developer advocate does internally, because internally, I need to make sure that we have an answer to these kind of things, right? We cannot just let it go. In this particular case, it was a matter of people not understanding how pricing works.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, by writing an article that says, okay, well, you have to really look at the fine prints to understand the pricing differences between the cloud providers. And if you really look at it, it's like we're not as expensive as you think we are. But this could apply to other cases when people try things out, it doesn't work, they complain about it on Twitter or on LinkedIn or whatever. And then you're like, well, have you tried this or have you tried that? Or maybe this is actually too complex and we need to make it simpler, right? So I think that that's big part of being in advocacy as well, is being able to communicate effectively internally toward the product team and make them understand if things are not clear, if things need to be clarified, if documentation needs to be clarified, if we need to make things simpler. Then there is also I think the third aspect of this job is the engineering part. You need to be an engineer, right? You need to have the technical ability to understand stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that comes through experimentation, comes through spending quite a lot of time trying out products and trying them in various use cases and stuff like that. And yeah, I think that these are the three main things that developer, in my opinion, advocacy needs. But that's, again, the other thing also about developer advocacy is that there is no one way to define it. It really means a lot of things depending on the company. In my company, this is what it means. It could mean different things in different other companies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is a good question. So with the rapid evolution of, let's say, cloud or the technology in general, what are the foundational principles that you believe will remain relevant regardless of future technological advancements? My God, my English is not Englishing today.
I think the basic stuff that I mentioned earlier, like the basics of how distributed systems works, how security works, how like very basic programming kind of algorithms kind of thing. These are stuff that doesn't really change and haven't changed in the last 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
As I said in the beginning, we are still doing service discovery the same way we were doing it when
Mm-hmm.
we invented DNS. We're still relying on DNS for service discovery. So I don't think that that's gonna change. And yes, companies invented new softwares to do service discovery, but and fundamentally under the hood is still DNS.
Mm-hmm.
So I think by focusing on the fundamentals, you will have a very good, I would say 70% to 80% coverage, regardless of how technology advances in the future, unless quantum computing becomes a commodity, and that's a different story.
Mm-hmm. I want to also continue. So I just graduated in March, and actually in 4 days I have
Congrats.
my ceremony. But when I was in university, even I and also my classmates or my friends, they often said that why should I go to university? Things that I learn at university are very fundamental and too basic. I can just drop out and take some courses or read things online and I can find a job like that. What is your take on that? Do you think it's necessary to attend university or do you think you can also get away without it?
Um, that's a very good question. I have friends who have done both. I myself did university like you, so I
Mm-hmm.
went to university and have a master's in computer science. But I have also friends who have done other stuff. I think university opens up a lot of options for you in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of those like fundamentals that might sound basic when you are studying them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not as basic when you need them in the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how university helped me personally. But then I think that the simple answer to that question is it depends on what are your inspirations.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to make a quick money, you want to start working very quickly, and you find a 6 months boot camp that can teach you how to become a full stack developer, that's also a valid option. Um, will that will that boot camp help you in the long run a large scale distributed system that handles millions of users,
Mm-hmm.
of concurrent users in the future? I have my reservations about that, right? Especially if you haven't, for example, studied the basics of distributed systems.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't studied like, fault injection and how to do disaster recovery and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff, which again might sound basic when you're studying them, but once you get to the point where you need them, then you go, oh, we studied actually that thing in university, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the answer I always give to this question when I'm asked is very simple. If you are able to understand how quorum works
Mm-hmm.
in a distributed system, then you can design a Netflix. If not, then good luck.
Mm-hmm.
That will be my answer, basically.
Okay, gotcha. Let's see. I think we also a little bit answered this question. But in your opinion, what are the most critical skills or mindset that technology leaders must cultivate to effectively lead cloud or some cool big transformations?
Oh, I think if you are in a position where you are a leader,
Be an
um,
empath, first of all, right?
sorry,
Be an empath.
yeah, of course, have empathy for sure, but just trust your team, right? I mean, developer might so one of the things the developer does really good is also one of the things that makes us look very weird when we are talking to people who are not in the tech field, because most people who are in the tech field are solution oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start presenting a problem to them, they will jump into designing a solution right away. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We have no patience for waiting to understand what you're trying to tell us.
mm-hmm.
Once you start talking about what you're trying to achieve, we're already putting a solution in our head, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that if you're able to cultivate this quick solution oriented aspect of how the field works, and especially the people who are in the field, cultivated in the sense of like, if you are, for example, a lead, instead of just presenting people with a big problem, try to split that problem into small solutions, a
Mm-hmm.
small problem, such a way that you can like find a solution for each problem individually and reiterate over that problem very quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, that already is a good starting point to leverage how quickly people are able to solve problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't present them with like, oh, we're trying to design the next Netflix streaming service. Just
Mm-hmm.
start at a very small level. Like, we need to build something that does this one specific task.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are a leader, especially if you're a tech leader and you're not able to translate business requirements into technical requirements, then you should probably hire somebody who can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like a lot of times when I talk to people in leadership positions, They talk big games about digital transformation and like empowering people and all these buzzwords that they use. And then if you ask them, what does that effectively mean? What does that actually, like, what are we trying to achieve? If they're not able to answer this question, that's a problem, right? So if you are in a position where you need to be able to answer effectively these questions, if you can, just hire somebody who can, right? Or promote somebody within your team who are able to understand these kind of things. And the last thing I'm gonna say is to transform a team from a technology point of view is not a guarantee, because in any team, in an organization, you will have people who are curious and willing to try out new things, and you will have people who doesn't give a damn and they just want to keep doing the same thing they want to do. And you have to find out a way to satisfy all these people somehow, right? You cannot satisfy everyone, but you need to figure out things that work for everyone. And in my opinion, in my experience working on digital transformation projects, that have been probably one of the key aspects of how. Another thing also, this is just last comment. I think that people in the tech field are too proud to say, I don't know. And this is probably a problem that a lot of people have. So my advice to people, if you don't know, just say I don't know and ask for help or ask for trainings or whatever you need to be able to know, right? And if you are a leader, you need to be able to decipher this kind of clues when you're talking to people to understand whether they actually are hesitant because they don't want to or are hesitant because they just don't understand, right? And be empathetic, because you cannot expect people to know everything.
Yeah, of course.
So
So now that you mentioned digital transformation, so the tech industry is very vulnerable to a lot of buzzwords and a lot of different trends. And
yes.
I specifically remember first it was microservices, then it was blockchain, now we have AI. How do you like really differentiate between like a passing fad or like a passing trend that will like eventually die out versus like something that is actually useful and transformative?
I mean, I think you answered the question. I think it's like, is it like, are there actually valid use cases for it? So the two examples you gave, like AI, when this thing started like last year, I was very skeptical. But as time progressed, I both found out actual valid technical use cases that I could help with my expertise on it. So I could actually help people solve actual problems they have. That's on one hand, because Kubernetes is one of the tools that is used quite a lot in the AI space, and there are quite a lot of tools around it. And the second thing is I saw like actual valid use cases that people are doing. One of the examples I just remember now from the top of my head is somebody built a RAG application, so retrieval augmented generation. It's just like a technique in AI. Basically, they ingest GitHub repositories from GitHub. They index them, index all the code, store it in a database, and they use a machine learning model to ask questions about that code using natural language. So they can ask the LLM, give me a function that does this, and then the LLM is able to tell you where the function is in your sea of
Repos.
repositories,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, exactly. That's a very good use case, right?
Yeah, that's actually a good
in my
use
opinion,
case.
that's
Yeah.
a very good use case. Or summarizing a PDF file, for example, or summarizing an article, or stuff like that. But this is just an example. The blockchain stuff, I'm still skeptical. I still don't understand what that thing actually is able to solve. But that's just me. I never really caught up with the blockchain and revolution or trend or whatever. So I never really was interested in it. So I think it's a little bit of intuition and a little bit of whether I see valid technical problems that are actually solvable and that I can solve. These are probably the two main things I rely on to see. Like, for example, Web3, just like it came and go, and I'm like, I have no idea what Web3 is. I heard about it before, and somebody is doing Web3 somewhere, but like whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now whenever I talk to people who are into the Web3/Web4/Web5, apparently there is even Web5 now, slash crypto/blockchain space, my main question to them is always like, have you solved the network speed problem? Because for people who doesn't know, Bitcoin network is notoriously slow, and
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the reasons why there have been a lot of other cryptocurrencies that have been created to create faster networks. Like, have you solved that throughput problem? Because if you haven't, then you cannot build a system on the blockchain that can scale to the internet,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's not a valid technology in my opinion. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So now I want to ask you some specific questions. So I think you follow me, and you know I'm a really big fan of Rust, the
yes.
programming language. Unfortunately, it's also quite used in the blockchain/crypto world. But yeah, Rust is a programming language I'm super passionate about. And I just wanted to know, like, so you're a developer advocate and you meet tons of people. You meet other speakers, you meet clients, you meet the community. So you have like wide range of people wearing all kinds of hats. And I just wanted to know, do you like maybe often or at least more recently have been hearing discussions about Rust as a programming language when interacting with these people?
Couple of times we did an interview for the podcast, the Kubernetes podcast. I forgot to mention this. I co-host a podcast called the Kubernetes podcast by Google, and we interviewed somebody called Matt Klein who built a very popular proxy called Envoy. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a cloud native proxy, and Envoy itself is built in C++.
Mm-hmm.
So Matt was one of the first people to build this proxy at Lyft, the company in Canada, like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
maybe less than 15, 10 years ago. And during our conversation, one of the questions I asked is like, if you would to rewrite Envoy from scratch, how would you do it? And he said, I would write it in Rust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the proxy itself is written in C++, and Rust is slightly more memory safe than C++, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So otherwise, I know that internally we use Rust in some projects inside Google.
And
I cannot say which ones.
Google also
Yeah,
has a
we use.
really good book for the Android team, the Rust book. It's open source on GitHub, and it's I think one of the best books to get started with Rust, to be honest. And
With Rust.
it was used for the Android developers within Google for them to learn more about Rust.
I didn't know that book existed. That's good. The other thing I know is that we use Rust for a couple of things, and I also started being interested in Rust about a year and a half ago when
Mm-hmm.
when I started being interested in WASM, the WebAssembly modules, so
Mm-hmm.
WebAssembly outside the browser, and actually Rust is one of the programming language that has excellent first-class support for WASM. So you can write code in Rust and translate it or to compile it into a WASM module, and it has really good support for it. Um, I think that it's probably an underappreciated programming language in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, is it going to replace the popular programming languages? Probably not. It will take some time to be adopted. If ever it reaches mass adoption, I don't know. But I think, in my opinion, there are a lot of very valid use cases for Rust. And one of them is the actual use cases that WASM is trying to solve, like writing super fast functions or super fast pieces of code that execute very fast and that are super or very good, very safe memory wise.
Mm-hmm.
That's an excellent value proposition in my opinion for programming language.
Mm-hmm. And let's look at it more from DevOps/cloud perspective. Where do you think Rust could be adopted in that sense?
I mean, I am a big fan of automation, so I think Rust, beyond it being a backend language, can be also used as a scripting language. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really good for like writing super fast scripts that can like run bunch of tasks, and because of how fast it can execute, that's like a very good choice. Um, I think I don't think that anybody today. So I think that Rust, generally speaking, is as a programming language, is slightly at a lower stack than most of the popular ones like
Mm-hmm.
Go and .NET and Java and stuff. So I don't think it's for everyone. And I think the way you could adopt it is either as a scripting language, or if you are lucky enough to work somewhere where you can build a proxy or a virtualization software,
Mm-hmm.
then or embedded hardware. Or the other use case I talked about is edge computing. So being able to write stuff, compile them as WASM, and run them on either low-end devices in the browser, or in on like edge workers. I think that Cloudflare supports Rust as an edge worker programming language. So they have this thing called Cloudflare workers, where you can deploy custom code on the edge workers or the edge proxies of Cloudflare, so you can do transformation on requests coming to your system. So as people are sending requests, you can execute, like filter them, or do authentication or authorization at the edge of the network. So for this kind of like super fast, very quick execution constraint environments, Rust is excellent for that.
Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to add, you mentioned this before, that you can read code, right? And
Yes.
I mean, I come from the DevOps world, and DevOps are not really required to, let's say, read or code per se. We use Terraform, and we have like Yum. Okay, that's fine, but we don't really do like OOP. I wanted to hear your opinion. Do you advise people in my field to learn like one language or a second one? If yes, how do you think it will like eventually help them out?
Well, first of all, I hope that people are moving away from Terraform, just because HashiCorp is not a good company anymore, and they don't care about open source anymore. There is the alternative called OpenTofu,
Mm-hmm.
like the fork of Terraform, and um, we had the opportunity to actually chat with one of the co-founders of OpenTofu for the podcast. We have an episode coming very very soon.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, we're talking a little bit about the story of how OpenTofu came to be, and where is it, and how that kind of project is progressing. Um, um, so that's already very good. Um, but yes, to answer your question, I don't think Terraform. So first of all, Terraform is not a programming language; it's a configuration language, right? So yes, it's what most DevOps people learn, because that's what you need to do your job. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not a programming language, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think learning a proper programming language is not going to hurt, because eventually you need to automate something,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to automate it in a way that Terraform cannot do. Very simple examples is, okay, Terraform can do if else and can do for loops, but that's about it. It's
Mm-hmm.
fairly limited in terms of um, like it doesn't have exceptions, it doesn't have while, it doesn't have like proper data structures, it doesn't have a lot of things that programming languages have. So I think learning a proper programming language wouldn't hurt, and it would probably even be beneficial for you as a DevOps person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think pick whatever programming language you feel comfortable with, Python, Go, Rust, whatever you name it, and just learn it and do stuff with it. Um, and then if you are in a situation where, as DevOps engineer, beyond automating infrastructure, you are also writing the actual application code, a second programming language wouldn't hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Something more substantial, something that is enterprise class, that is used at the enterprise level, or even front-end JavaScript is also a very good option. So, or Rust. I feel like, I think that basically learning a programming language never hurts. That's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And I have a final question to you.
I mean,
I want you to give. I asked this to all of my guests on our Q&A with friends. What advice would you give someone that's just starting in tech industry, more specifically in cloud?
oh yeah, there is, okay. That's like a big, that's a big box of worm that you're opening there. I think my advice, generally speaking, if you'd have asked me this a few years ago, I would have given you this like standard advice of like, you can learn everything on the internet and all this stuff, right? Just be authentic, just be yourself, right? If there is one thing I learned over the last few years specifically, is People have a very weird expectation toward what a developer should and shouldn't be. In the sense of like if you deviate a little bit from the norm, whatever that norm is, and whoever put that norm in place, you are deemed not a real developer.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say screw that. Be yourself and do the things that you like to do. I like mechanical keyboards, big screens, and a proper desk.
Mm-hmm.
If you are able to write code on a 14-inch laptop at the beach with a mojito, power to you. Please be my guest. Do it as long as you get stuff done, right? I don't think people should try to adhere to a certain image of what a developer or what a technical person should or shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
Just be yourself and do the things that makes you happy. And if you have um, a unique background, whether it's your culture and where you're coming from, whether it's your family, whether it's a topic that you're really passionate about, feel free to share that and don't care about what people have to say. Just be
Mm-hmm.
yourself, basically.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow, it's a good advice. I think even I need a little bit of that advice. I also resonate with that. Um,
Well, you have those like cute ears, so that's
yeah.
pretty cool.
Thanks.
I saw
Thanks.
them the other day when you invited me. I saw like a video. That was like, that's really cool headset.
They also change color, but I prefer to
Yeah, I
keep
know.
them
They're like
green.
the Razer headphones, right?
Yeah, correct, correct.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, actually, I think I asked you most of the questions. I don't have anything else. Maybe you have a question to ask me, and if not, we can wrap it up, say goodbyes, and I hope I see you sometime soon.
When are you writing your next Rust book?
Hopefully very soon. I don't think it will be necessarily a book because I had two guests already that have written books, and from their personal experience, it sounds horrible. So I think I'll just stick to a course instead of a book. But yeah,
The course is also a good starting point.
yeah, I think so too. But it will come soon, and I think I'm thinking to do it more DevOps related as well. There is this like website where you can see uh, different paths of different professions, and one of
Mhm.
them is the path to DevOps, and it lists like all the technologies you should learn. And it's really huge. But recently they also added Rust, and I was super shocked to see like Rust being included in there. So yeah,
Nice.
maybe something will come soon.
Awesome.
So
Awesome. Looking forward.
yeah, you'll be the first one to receive the news. So
Please let me know.
so yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much again. It was really interesting to talk to you, and I really enjoy talking to you. You're so passionate, and I don't know, you have really good way of speaking. You're so energetic, and you put, I don't know, good energy and vibes into it. And
Thank you very much.
yeah, I wish you a good day, and I hope I see you soon.
Have a good day too.
Goodbye, Abdel.